Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. All right, good evening. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Glad to have you all here. Welcome to the C3 stream. It's Tuesday night. Time for some Tuesday night teaching, everybody. Get excited. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here this evening. I got some tea here. I'm drinking some green tea tonight. I got my mug tea. And, yeah, getting going. Tuesday night. We are in full Easter prep as a staff. So, we won't perfectly line up with studying the book of Luke with, like, crucifixion, but we'll be close. We'll be close. We're in Jesus stories, so that's good. That's good. All right. So tonight's big question to start us off, get you thinking tonight. We are covering now some of the more arguably famous stories of Jesus. We're covering tonight some of the most famous stories of Jesus, getting into those that have become popular, that you hear preached on a lot. So my question to you tonight, take a moment, drop it in the comments, is what Jesus story do you wish that you could have been an observer? Right? So where, or what story from the Bible that's got to do with Jesus do you wish you could have, like, shown up and watched and see him do it? Is it a healing? Do you wish you could have heard him preach? Is there a specific story that sticks out to you? But what is it? What is the story or situation that you wish you could have stepped right into the Bible, shown up, and watched? Take a moment, think about it, drop it in the comments when you're ready. What is a Jesus story do you wish you could step into as an observer? Throw it in the comments if you got one. While you're thinking of it, let me go and remind you kind of where we left off from last week. We're in Luke chapter 4. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, welcome. So glad you're here. We're studying the book of Luke, and if you go back into the, for example, YouTube videos and the playlist, you'll know that we are traveling through the Bible in a narrative walk. That means we're taking our time looking at the Bible in a chronological sense. All right, so we're tracking through chronologically the story of the Bible. The Bible is not arranged in chronological order, and so we're going kind of out of our way to put it in our chronological order. So we've traveled through the entire Old Testament. We're now into the New Testament, and we're into the life of Jesus. We're focused on the book of Luke because Luke is the first of a two-part, the second part being the book of Acts. The book of Luke and the book of Acts were intentionally written to be together, part 1, part 2. The book of Luke being about Jesus, the book of Acts being about the church. So, Luke chapter 4, that's where we are. And we left off last week looking at the temptation of Jesus. We talked about his baptism, we talked about his genealogy a little bit. And then we got into a famous story, the temptation of Jesus, where Jesus is out in the wilderness, kind of replaying, if you will, as a person, a microcosm, a small aspect of the larger picture of how the people of Israel spent time in the wilderness. So Jesus is kind of like an Israel representative here. He goes out in the wilderness and experiences temptation and so forth, just like the people of Israel in the Old Testament did. So it's kind of cool tying the Old and the New Testament together, which we begin to see all over the place. This gospel was written for non-Jews primarily, but it is steeped in Old Testament references because Luke himself is a Jew. So we'll find more of that tonight. Awesome. Oh, there you go. Okay, so people are throwing stuff in there. What is the story, the moment, the biblical experience that you wish you could step into and see as an observer? What is the moment? What is the time? What is the Jesus-based story? Take a moment, drop it in the comments, where you wish you could step in and kind of see exactly what was going on. What's the story? Jesus-centric, Jesus-oriented story you wish you could show up and Just like, you know what I'm talking about? Like step into the biblical story. Right now we got one for on the cross. All right, so cross. Sherry's going for the cross. Sherry, I hope you're doing well. My goodness, I hope you were doing wonderfully well. On the cross, perfect time with Good Friday right on the horizon. Oh, I should have been in my other mug. Sherry's the one who blessed me with. Yeah, it's back there. You guys, can you see it? This mug. That's from Sherry. Thank you, Sherry. I love that mug. So we got a vote for on the cross from Sherry. Patty, seeing Jesus walk on water and encouraging Peter to join him. Yeah, oh, I dig that. Yeah. Famous story where they're in this storm and there's, you know, the waves are going around and all this sort of stuff. And it's this big climactic moment with Peter. Peter, not Jesus walking on water, which is like, you know, right? Mind blowing. Love it. Love it. Joe, appearing to the apostles after the resurrection. Nice. Yes. Any particular, because there's a couple examples where he does that. You talking about the garden with the women? You talking the apostles themselves, I guess. So you're like in the when they're hanging out in the room, and all of a sudden he's like, boom, right there. Love it. Yep, I'm with you there. Top two. Oh, Sarah's throwing two out there. Jesus telling the little children to come to him. Oh, I like that. I like that. That's particularly good, everybody, because Sarah's our children's person. Thank you, Sarah. Oh, and you got another one. Any of the interactions between Jesus and Peter. All right. I love it. So you're hopping on you're with Patty and the Peter train, huh? You want to see some Peter interaction? Well, aren't you curious what Peter must have been like in real life? I mean, we got a ton of stories about him, but I really wonder what he looked like and what kind of character he was, how he talked, and all this sort of stuff. I'm really curious about that too. So, Trudy, I'd like to see him after the resurrection. All right, so after the resurrection. Trudy, you got any specific point after resurrection? Any one specific moment, or you just anytime post resurrection? Put your hand in his hands. I'm curious. Brian says Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, Brian. Oh, I love that. Sherry, tell Brian that he will very much like Maundy Thursday. This coming Maundy Thursday, we're going to be a little unique. We're going to try something this Maundy Thursday we haven't. I'm giving you guys a sneak peek because you guys are tuning in and you're here. Bonus points to you being part of the C3 stream. You get the sneak peek. But Maundy Thursday is going to have a heavy Garden of Gethsemane orientation and theme. Normally, we locate ourselves within the context of the upper room. We are going to dip into the garden narrative. Pam as well. Another vote for Garden of Gethsemane. 2 for the garden. Well, you both will love Maundy Thursday then. Yeah, the garden where he's praying and everything went down with his arrest, and you got the disciples sleeping over there. I love it. That's fabulous. That is good stuff. That's good stuff. Awesome. Oh, Michelle, not observe but participate in the conversation. Road to Emmaus. Oh, that's a great one. That's a fabulous one, Michelle. That's awesome. Thank you. Road to Emmaus. That is Pastor Bob's favorite story in the Bible. Little sub note for you. Pastor Bob's favorite story is the Road to Emmaus from the Bible. Trudy, there we go. On the path when he Road to Emmaus. I'm assuming that's what you mean. On the path when he encountered his disciples. I'm assuming you're talking about that same one. Trudy, you and Michelle doubling down on the Road to Emmaus there. I love it. That is fabulous, guys. Absolutely love it. Well, all right. If you think of more, or if you are still tuning in, yep, people still coming in, joining us. Fabulous. Glad you're all here. Look at that. Glad you guys are here. YouTube, Facebook, awesome. I can grab comments from YouTube, by the way. So if you're watching on the big screen TV, fabulous. But if you want to type in the comments, I can see it, which is kind of fun. Yeah, love it, guys. That's awesome. All right, if you think of it and you got more to throw in there, let me know. But we are going to be covering some of the more popular stories tonight. Kind of kicking off with the reason why I was curious about the question was because this is one of the most talked about, preached on stories in in the Bible having to do with Jesus, period. The story that we're kicking off with and where we are starting. So the one that we are starting off with tonight is this bold, big old claim that Jesus makes. Let's do it. Let's dive on in. You guys ready? Here we go. All right, so here's my fancy pantsy software for you. That way, there you go. Now you guys can see what I see. And this is where we are picking up from where we left off last time. Okay, so Luke chapter 4 is just up above. Temptations of Jesus. And directly following this back and forth between him and the tempter, he goes home. This is fascinating. He goes home to Nazareth, all right? Jesus heads home to Nazareth. Nazareth is way up north. It's this small, tiny, inconspicuous. Can I say that time? I did a topic guide here. Let me see if I can bring it up. No. Yeah, that'll probably take us to a big map. No, that's not a very good map. No. Yeah. I want to show you guys up north. Yeah, here we go. This should be a zoom in. So Galilee is, yeah, that's better. Okay, let me show you this. Hey, Dan Gonring's here. Welcome, Dan. Glad you're here joining us tonight. Tuning in. Love it, Dan. Thanks for being here, bud. Dan, what is your favorite story that you wish you could be an observer? If you could step into a Jesus story and be an observer, what would be the story that you would pick? Think about it and drop it in the comments for us. We got all sorts of fun stuff. So, all right, here's a map. You guys all love maps. That's why I always go out of my way to show you maps. So here's the map. Dead Sea down below. Okay, Dead Sea's down here. Jerusalem's like right in there. Way up here is this region. So Galilee is a region, okay? It's kind of like saying the Midwest, okay? It's an area. It's a geographic, it's not a town. It's a geographic location, and it's all based on the Sea of Galilee. Now, when we say Sea of Galilee, let's be clear. The big blue to the left is the Mediterranean Sea, okay? That's Crete and all this stuff. That's the Mediterranean Sea. This tiny lake, that's all that is. This tiny lake. This is also referred to as a sea. This is the Sea of Galilee. So, like, you know, we're for those of you, you know, Wisconsinites, the Sea of Galilee is just like, you know, a lake. Just as a reference point. Okay. I wanted to show you this, though, because it shows you Nazareth on here. You guys see Nazareth is over here. So Nazareth is this tiny, inconspicuous town. It's the home of Jesus, and it's a little mountainous. You can see the area here. It is actually very mountainous. Nazareth, at the time of Jesus, would have been maybe 40 people, 50 people. You know, a couple families. That's really all you're talking. The more metropolitan areas would have been around all these, the sea itself. So on the sea, you can get Capernaum. That's kind of the big one in the area. Bethsaida, another big one. But there's all around the Sea of Galilee, you've got towns. And some of these towns are Jewish. Some of these towns are Roman. Some of these towns are Greek. But there's population at the water itself. Jesus's hometown is just this rinky-dink, out-of-the-way place. Like, there ain't nothing in this area. It's just this rinky-dink little spot. But that's where he heads home. He goes from down south near the Dead Sea. This is where he would have been baptized. The Jordan River is running all the way through it. He goes from down south, and the next time we see him, he's retreated back up north. Now, what's in between this is Samaria. This area. This is Samaria. Okay? Samaritans don't really like the Jews. The Jews don't really like Samaritans. Yeah, I mean, you guys get it. Let's see if I can find... Let's minimize that. And... Oh, look. Here's a picture. Well, that's not accurate, though. That's just a painting. Yeah. So, that's Nazareth for you, though. I wanted to at least give you guys a sense of that. What did I have up here? Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll show you that later. Okay. So, he heads back up north. It's green. It's in the hills. And it's this tiny little town. He goes to this town, and bear in mind, I mentioned before, it's like 40 to 50 people in this town, right? So when Jesus shows up, everybody knows everybody. Any of you live in a small town before? Any of you grow up in like a little town? You know what I'm talking about? Everybody knows everybody. Jesus would have grown up in a space where everybody knows everybody, okay? That is particularly why Mary's pregnancy would have been a big deal, because everybody knows she ain't married yet to Joseph, right? And so there's that cultural emphasis in Judaism. Yeah, everybody knows everybody. So Jesus returns to Galilee. He's filled with the Holy Spirit's power. So having put a stop to the tempter and said no to all the temptations, he's immediately filled with the Holy Spirit. And this is a cool thing because it kind of, helps us frame and see that when you go out of your way to deny and to, this wilderness experience, if you've ever had a wilderness experience before where you felt tempted and frustrated and all these sort of stuff. And yeah, there we go. Who grew up in a town of less than 400? Susan. The Eggolds are here. Yeah, so Susan. Susan, isn't it true? Right? Grew up in a town of less than 400. Everybody knows everybody. So, side note. You guys see this thing right up here? You see this? You can link your account by going to that. Type that. Bring up a new window. Type that into the window. And then you can link your account, which means that your names and your little pictures will show up on the... It'll tell us who you are in the comments, which is kind of cool. So feel free to do that. No pressure. There's no pressure. So he shows up to home. Everybody knows everybody. And he's got this... I mean, the guy's jazzed. The guy's just ripping with, good old-fashioned spirit. Okay? And he's now had a public declaration and recognition that he is unique and special. So reports about him are spreading quickly all throughout the region. And so when they say that, they kind of mean like Galilee and the surrounding areas. And he's started traveling. He teaches regularly in their synagogues, and he was praised by everyone. So he's returning back north. As he's going out of his way to stop in synagogues. Now, a synagogue is kind of like the local church, but it's more than that. It is a community center. It's where you would have gone for... It's as if you took church and married it with like a town center or a city center. That's what their synagogues were. It's a Jewish country. So faith and politics are one. They're like one and the same. It's a theocracy, right? So the things that would have been of utmost importance to the city are by nature political in orientation, right? It's faith and politics together. How old is Jesus at this time? We're ballparking about 30. We're guessing he's about 30-ish. Okay, so young man. Bear in mind the life expectancy was different back then. Life expectancy was radically different. Okay, they didn't have hospitals, they didn't have the health care, they didn't have any of that stuff. But so he would be considered, full-grown man for sure, like well into manhood. We've kind of got this idea in our current contemporary culture that you don't hit adulthood until 18 and beyond. And even if you are 18, the state recognizes you as an adult, but the culture doesn't necessarily, you grow into your adulthood, so to speak. In Jesus's time, all that timeline is backed up. So, by the time you're 18, you are for sure a full-grown adult, considered an adult in the community type thing. You start looking at and being considered an adult closer to the age of about 12 or 13 in this the bar mitzvah, that's the coming into your adulthood celebration. Okay, so Jesus is maybe 30ish, but he is a full-grown with life experience man, and he is now traveling, stopping at these city centers and speaking. He's beginning to teach and preach, and people are listening to him. This was common practice by rabbis. This is what rabbis would do. Rabbis would travel to different synagogues, and they would preach and teach. They were kind of like, that was an occupation that you could have, was being a traveling rabbi. In fact, the whole process by which Jesus follows getting disciples was a common practice. You would hear a rabbi that you liked, who you want to learn from, and so you would audition and you would try out to be his apprentice, his disciple, and only the best of the best of the best were really allowed to follow a rabbi. You had to be schooled in, you had to learn letters, you had to be able to read, you had to memorize huge swaths of the Old Testament. And so this is part of the reason why Jesus' disciples are so non-traditional. In every town or every village, you've got a synagogue where traveling rabbis would come. They would be a guest preacher or speaker, and then the brightest students in the town who had the most knowledge base and most promise related to becoming a rabbi, they may or may not end up grafting themselves onto one of these traveling rabbis. So what Jesus is doing is actually normalized within the culture. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, this was a job or occupation, and people would take care of the traveling rabbi. He would come in, and he would be taken care of by the generosity of others. Jesus himself was a traveling itinerant preacher where people would just be generous. They'd be radically generous. They'd welcome him into his home, and they would take care of him and all those sort of things. Now, it's possible that he also had some skills. It's possible that he was a craftsman. It would have been the normal track to take over the family business. We know that Joseph is a, teknoi? It means craftsman. And so most people associate that with carpentry. Ironically, here's a newsflash for you. You probably don't know this, but it's probably more likely that Joseph was a mason. He's probably like a jack of all trades, to be honest. But, we always zero in on carpentry, but believe it or not, there's not a lot of trees in that area. Homes were built out of stone and so forth. So Jesus probably learned the family trade, and then somewhere along the line, starts doing what he's doing right now, which is kind of moving into that traveling, teaching occupation and profession. So he's teaching, and as he's going, he's teaching in these synagogues. I want to show you a picture of a synagogue. Come on, computer. All right, here's a picture of a synagogue. Okay, this is the synagogue at Capernaum, which is eventually where Jesus will make his home base, or his base of operations. Capernaum is one of the larger cities on the Sea of Galilee, and this is where he will go and do the majority of his major. Capernaum becomes kind of his spot, his launching pad. This is an example of an ancient synagogue. You can see there, it had some pillars. It's just a big room with some stadium seating. And this is where people would do trade deals. This is where people would read the news or hear the news, so to speak. This is any community-based decision-making would be done here. And this is also where they would go on Shabbat, Sabbath, to hear the Old Testament read and talked and so forth. So Jesus would have showed up to one of these, and he would have gone into the center. Oftentimes in the synagogue, if they were wealthy enough, they would have a scroll. They would have some... it was pretty rare, right? Books are rare. Scrolls are rare. The synagogue at Capernaum had a wealthy backdrop. It's a prosperous trading town, and so they actually have one. But there's probably like a lectern, if I use that old-fashioned term. They had a small table where they would bring this small table out. It would sit maybe in the center. The speaker would stand, and then once he's ready to teach, he would sit down at the lectern, and then all the people in the stadium seating would basically listen to him teach. So this is basically early church in a lot of ways, right? Where you have a preacher and then everybody listens to him. So this is what Jesus did. He went to places like this, traveling back home and teaching, stopping at these synagogues and being a guest preacher. That's what he was doing. Okay. Now, when he gets to his home village in Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual. Okay. So by now it's become a habit to go to the synagogue specifically on the Sabbath, which is what all the good Jewish boys and girls would do. Okay. And he stood there, and he stood up to read the scriptures. The scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. Now, in all likelihood, it's not like they had the entire Old Testament. They might have, because they're a small town, had some of Isaiah, some of Job, some of Esther, like a couple chapters here, a couple chapters there, and maybe a handful of full books. So maybe they did. It's possible that they had the entirety of Isaiah. It's entirely possible. It's also possible that they only had some of him. But for whatever reason, he gets handed this specific scroll, that was the reading for the day. That was the focus of the day. And he gets to choose where, right? So he actually goes into that scroll, and it's kind of like, this is what we're going to study together, everybody. And he specifically chooses, it's Isaiah, there it is, 4. Nope, 6. Yeah, it's 6 because that's when it comes to him. 61. Isaiah 61 verses 1 and 2. Oh, you guys can't see it. It gets off on yours. There you go. Isaiah 61 verses 1 and 2. And it is literally word for word. This is what he reads, right? The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives will be released, that the blind will see, the oppressed will be set free, and the time of the Lord's favor has come. This is huge. Okay, this is a declaration of messianic proportions. This is Jesus making... You don't read this one lightly, okay? First off, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. True statement. Why? Well, he's filled with the Holy Spirit's power. So we know that he's in fact speaking with great credibility. This is a moment when Jesus is living the Old Testament scriptures quite literally. He's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. That good news is the Greek word euangelion, okay? That's the same. It's a gospel. We translate that more often than not as gospel. So he's anointed me to bring gospel good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives will be released, the blind will see, the oppressed will be set free. This is all allusions to Old Testament practice, dipping back to something called the year of plenty or the year of Jubilee. Okay, in the year of Jubilee, all debts are forgiven, slaves are set free. The year of Jubilee, the big one, happens every 70 years, I believe it is. I think it's every 70 years. Every 7 years, there's a small one, and then on the anniversary of that, every 10th anniversary of that, it's like a mega one, okay? And on the mega one, that's the year of Jubilee, where people are set free. Like if you have indentured servitude, if you get sold as a slave, specifically within the Jewish context, you are given your freedom. Debts are all canceled. It's total freedom. And in fact, there's a Jewish law that acknowledges some people will go out and borrow a bunch of money, like right before the year of Jubilee, and then it's the year of Jubilee, and their debts are forgiven. And the Bible actually says, like, that's okay. It's better to err on the side of generosity than not. Yes, people will take advantage of your generosity, but it is better because of who God wants you to be to err on the side of generosity. And so this is a really big deal that has to do with defining what it means to be Jewish. Everybody who is Jewish knew the significance of the year of Jubilee and knew the significance of, like, this particular claim. Now, Jesus will actually do this not only, he does this, he takes the year of Jubilee and the idea of canceling of debts and the freedom and release, captives will be released. He takes this to a whole new level, right? He takes this to a whole new level. What are you and I captive to? Well, yeah, you and I might not be indentured servants right now, but we are captive to sin, as the Bible would describe it, right? So the Apostle Paul, who is Jewish, would pick up on this and recognizes, yeah, we're captive to sin. Hey, the Zatarskis are tuning in. Dan, how are you? Hope you're doing well, buddy. Love it. Hi, Monica. Hope you're doing great. Hi, kiddos. Or they're all in bed. Is it 8 o'clock? Are they still running around? Maybe they're still running around. Glad the Zatarskis are tuning in. So yeah, this is big because Jesus is saying, not that he's going to all of a sudden cancel debts and set people free from indentured servitude, but he will cancel the debt of sin, the framework of sin, and he will set the people, the oppressed, those who are oppressed by sleeping. Good. They're sleeping. Okay. Mine are too. Jesus is setting everybody free, in a sense, free from sin, death, and the devil. And this is all the year of the Lord's favor. This is all Jubilee stuff. Okay, so he rolls up the scroll, he hands it back to the attendant, and then he sits down. So this is the moment where he's going to teach. It's a pretty big statement, right? And Luke acknowledges it. He's like, all eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. So everybody's like, okay, why did you choose this one? Right? Why did Jesus chose this specific verse? Why? And Jesus tells us, the scripture you've just heard has been fulfilled this very day. Oh, dang! So this is a claim that Jesus is making about his kingdom, about deliverance, about freedom, about what it means to follow him, that the year of Jubilee for a Christian person is today. Okay, it's not just somewhere in the future, that your year of Jubilee, your freedom, your forgiveness, your release from debt, your healing has begun. Okay, it's not out in some distant future. It's already breaking into the present. It has been fulfilled this very day. Okay, and this was totally messianic scripture, So for him to say that it's fulfilled this very day is like, whoa. Basically you're claiming to be the Messiah. Now, everyone spoke well of him and was amazed by the gracious words that come from his lips. Okay, so far so good. Not only in the immediacy of Nazareth, but this is kind of like saying, this is Luke saying, leading up until this moment. So when he's traveling, when all the reports, and when he's teaching everywhere, everybody seems to like what he's teaching and preaching as he's traveling. But then he comes back home and he says to all the people who grew up with him, the people that saw him riding his little bike growing up, the people that saw him, day in and day out, the people who changed his diapers, people who taught him how to read, those people. He's telling them he's the Messiah. So it's not surprising when the response is like, what? How can this be? Ain't that Joe's son? Like, you're telling me from little old backwater Nazareth, this guy thinks that he's the Messiah? That's Joseph's kid. That Mary and Joseph's kid, who, just as a reminder for you, has suspect lineage. Town of 40 to 50. Everybody knows everybody. This is one of the most awkward moments because they're looking at Jesus saying, we know him, we know his family, and now he's claiming to be the Messiah? He's saying that the year of Jubilee is here? What? Jesus gives them the response. Undoubtedly, you're going to quote me this proverb. Physician, heal yourself, meaning do miracles here in your hometown like those you did in Capernaum. So his reputation has preceded him. The people know that Jesus is not your average Joe anymore. Like, they get that he's not his dad. There's something special about Jesus. He has done miracles and wonders. And they're like, if you're going to be this guy, if you're going to be this Messiah, do miracles here. Prove it. But Jesus responds, I tell you the truth, no prophet is accepted in his own hometown. And that's a big statement. Bingo. That's exactly right, Michelle. It's hard to speak to a group of people who know you so well already. I mean, talk about a reframe. Seeing this little scrawny Jewish kid growing up to seeing him as God incarnate, the promised Messiah that generations have been waiting upon. That's not a small 180. So in some ways, we can say that this is like not surprising. And Jesus himself basically confirms that. Now, he does that, but throws a jab while he does it. He follows it up by saying, certainly there were many needy widows in Israel in Elijah's time, when the heavens were closed for 3.5 years and a severe famine devastated the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them. He was sent instead to a foreigner, a widow of Zarephath in the land of Sidon, and many of the Israel had leprosy at the time of the prophet Elisha, but only the one who was healed was Naaman the Syrian. Okay, so this is more or less him saying, look, here are two examples where, ironically, it was the foreigner, the person, the Syrian, and the widow of Zephyr, non-Jews. It was the non-Jews who accepted what God was doing. And the Jews rejected him. So Jesus is drawing a parallel here. Dan, in my past business, we always said you're not an expert or professional until you're away from home. True. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. This is Jesus showing up and making these big, bold claims. And so it's not surprising that the people have trouble with it. Yeah, Dan, that's exactly right. In some ways we can understand, right? I don't know about you. I feel like I can empathize with them. Like, okay, you're going to make these big, bold claims. You're doing all this weird, crazy stuff in other towns. Like, do it here. It shouldn't surprise us. It shouldn't surprise us in some ways. But Jesus is mad. Like, Jesus is still unhappy about it, going out of his way to draw a contrast, saying, look, if there ain't faith here, God will find faith elsewhere. That's what he's doing here. If there ain't no faith in Nazareth, I'm a moving on and gonna find it elsewhere. So, not surprisingly, when the people hear this, they're furious. Jesus is throwing them under the bus. Jumping up, they mobbed him, and they forced him to the edge of a hill on which the town was built. I mentioned before, it's very hilly, right? We saw in the Atlas map. They intended to push him over a cliff, but he passed right through the crowd, and he went on his way. Now, this is kind of weird. We don't know what's up. We don't know if this is supernatural. We don't know if he said something. But here's what we do know. This is what we got to go on, guys. They all mad. The town is in an uproar because the kid came home, said he's the Messiah, didn't do anything to prove it, And when push comes to shove, he basically says, you guys are going to have a hard time believing in me, so I'll go elsewhere. They're furious. They're ready to kill him. Okay. Now, Baron, some of you are like, what do you mean? Doesn't that seem a bit extreme? Well, the Jewish way of life and the Jewish normalcy is different than what's normal for you and me. You don't make this claim, okay? You do not claim to be the Messiah or be God lightly. In fact, it's called blasphemy, and it's like one of the top no-nos in the Jewish tradition. You do not blaspheme. This is ultimately in Luke what gets Jesus killed, right? I'd have to double check which gospel it is, but it's the claim to be God, more or less. Depending on which gospel, there's different reasons for his arrest and being killed. So, this one it might be kingship. I'd have to double check. I haven't revisited Luke's passion story in a while. The point is, though, he claims to be the Messiah. He claims to have this new kingdom that's here, and the people reject him. And it's not surprisingly. It actually fits that they would be both mad and want to kill him. Okay? So there's a severing here of the past, that from here on, Jesus will not be heading back to Capernaum, right? I mean, he's like, I'm out of there. And he goes on his way. We don't know, Will. Story, he would like to be at the feeding. Oh, Will's story. Nice. He would like to be at the feeding of the 5,000. Yeah, you want the unlimited food. Spoken like a true teen boy. That is absolutely fabulous. That is hilarious. I love that, Sarah. Did this have backlash on Mary and his family? Great question, and you gotta figure yes. Okay, Mary eventually. We don't know a ton about Mary, where she stays or how this all happens, but we know that she is mobile enough that she does show up in a variety of the Gospels in a variety of places. Most notably, we talked earlier just briefly about the cross. Jesus, in his crucifixion, Mary was there. So that means Mary's in Jerusalem. She shows up. There are a couple times where she shows up during his teaching. It's like your mother Mary and your family is looking for you, and Jesus' response is, "Who's my family? It's all of you. It's the people of God. The entire people of God is my family," right? So we know that Mary shows up in other stories. We don't really know whether or not she just lived out her days in Nazareth. In John, I think John is where Jesus asks that the beloved disciple John take care of Mary. So, but to answer yeah, right? It's got to be. She must have gotten flack for this. There's got to be people who, in a town of 40 to 50, maybe even if you stretch it and you say 70, 80, whatever. I mean, man. Joseph's nowhere in the picture here. This is the most we get. Isn't this Joseph's son? But that, we don't really get Joseph or details about Joseph, whether or not Joseph is alive when this happens. We don't know that. But if he is, and bear in mind, Jesus has brothers and sisters. Jesus has family. He's got brothers and sisters biologically that would have suffered through what it means to be associated with him. Not an easy thing. Not an easy thing. This is one of the most famous stories in the Gospels, all four of them. This is one of the most famous, as it is this specific Isaiah chapter that he quotes. A lot of people look at this and say that this is the thematic verse for the entire Gospel of Luke, that the whole Gospel of Luke hinges and is oriented around this particular statement. Like from here on out, Jesus will do this. He's going to be Luke focuses heavily on the oppressed, the sick, the blind, the lame. He focuses on demons and exorcisms along with Mark, but it's a little more nuanced. But Luke has a lot of like freeing people, okay, and embracing people who are outside the norm, the people who are on the edges, the people who are ostracized, and that's all right here, the poor and the oppressed, and is supported as well here. That Jesus is here not just for the Jewish people, but that Jesus is here for the whole world. Jesus is here for the Jews and the non-Jews, which this makes sense again if Luke is writing to, as a Jew, but he's writing to a non-Jewish audience. Theophilus is a Greek name, and so he's probably writing to a group of Greeks. So this is actually a really cool statement for non-Jews to say, hey, faith is found outside of the specifically Jewish tradition and covenant. We can be accepted and welcomed into that. And in fact, there is precedent for it that Jesus is well aware of. So this is kind of the hinging story for all of the Gospel of Luke. This is it. This is it. Now he follows that up by casting out some demons. I'm going to go a little bit faster, guys, because we spent a lot of time on that, but for good reason. So he follows it up. He's traveling. Now he moves to his new base, town of Galilee, Capernaum. That's the town that I mentioned before. And he really, I mean, he's there all the time. For some of you, you have been to Capernaum. For any of you who have done some traveling with Pastor Bob, he's going to be planning another trip for 2022 to the Holy Land. You go to Capernaum. I've had the privilege of being at Capernaum as well, and going to all the ruins that are at Capernaum. But this is where the disciples would have come from. Peter's home is Capernaum. This is his new home base of operations. It would have been a bustling city. Primarily Jewish, heavily Jewish. It would have been heavily Jewish. Would have had some Greek influence. Greek traders would have been around the area. Obviously, the Romans are in charge, so there would have been some Romans passing through town, but it would have been predominantly Jewish in its makeup. And people love him there. Like, they all over it, you know. There, too, the people were amazed at his teaching, for he spoke with authority. That's a big theme in Luke as well, authority. That's one of his big things. He has the authority to cast out demons as an example. You see how that sets that up. So once he's in the synagogue, a man possessed by a demon, an evil spirit cried out, shouting, "Go away." What's the asterisk? Unclean. Unclean is a Jewish term. Not good. Okay, food is unclean. People are unclean. It's kind of a way of saying evil or not right. Okay, so there's this evil not right spirit that has possessed the man. Jesus has an interaction with him, and the demon knows exactly who Jesus is. Okay, so why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? You've come to destroy us. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. So having coming off the claim that Jesus is the Messiah that we just looked at, now we get it affirmed, ironically, by a demon. That even the demons seem to know Jesus is the Messiah. He's the promised one, the Holy One of God. But Jesus doesn't want him spilling the beans. Jesus in the book of Luke he's very careful with his timelines. He does things in certain orders and for certain reasons. The culmination of the Gospel of Luke happens in Jerusalem. And so things ramp up. But this is something in the Gospel of Luke called the Messianic secret. And he keeps it quiet. Brian also would like to have been there when he spoke of the widow's offering. Ooh, yeah, that would have been a good one. That is in Luke. That's one of the Lucan stories. When Jesus is in the temple and the widow's mite, the widow's offering. That's one of the Lucan stories that we looked at last year. Last year we did temple steps. It's been a year already. Can you believe that? All right. What's up? What's going on? My software froze? Man. No, we're good. Okay, we're back. Amazed people, what authority. Oop, no. My software is great, but it is finicky. What authority and power this man possessed. Even the evil spirits obey him. They flee at his command. The news about Jesus spread. So again, this is the building up. This is a building up. Luke is like a snowball that climaxes with Jerusalem. And Luke is very intentional about that, building the suspense, building momentum towards Jerusalem. So here you see he is setting the people free. There's a measure of freedom as people are being set free from somebody who's being oppressed by an evil spirit. Now it's followed up very quickly with oppression by sickness, physical sickness type stuff. So after leaving the synagogue that day, Jesus went to Simon's home, that is Simon Peter, okay? And this would have been in Capernaum. So Simon Peter's home is Capernaum. He finds Simon's mother-in-law very sick with a high fever, and Peter asks for a healing. He said, hey, my mom is having trouble. A lot of people don't realize that the disciples also had families. The disciples also had families. Not all the disciples, but here's an example where we know for a fact Peter is married. We don't know if Peter has kids or not. We don't know the finer details. All we get is this one kind of quirky story about his mother-in-law who's having a hard day and she's sick. All right. Standing by the bedside, Jesus rebukes the fever and it leaves. At once she gets up and she prepares a meal for them, entailing, Jesus as well as his disciples. So by now he's garnering disciples. In some of the different gospels, we get moments where Jesus calls the disciples to him. It depends on which gospel you're looking at. You get different names, but eventually he gets all his disciples around him. There's not 12 of them by this point in time. Like that happens over a period of time. But he would have been traveling in a group by now. As the sun set down in the evening, people went throughout the village and they bring people who are sick to Jesus. So this is kind of a cool moment, guys, because Jesus is setting up shop in Capernaum. He's just started doing some truly miraculous things, some healings, and word gets out that Jesus is in town. And so it's like, hey, y'all, anybody who ain't feeling good, hobble your way to Peter's home and ask for Jesus. So Jesus is just like, it's like drive-by healings. He's just healing one after another. No matter what their diseases were, Jesus' touch, his hand would heal every single one of them, okay? The touch of his hand. Notice that he's willing to touch as well. This is big, especially when you get to healings that have to do with physical ailments or leprosy and stuff like that. Sarah, she got up at once and made a meal. I know, like the ultimate mom move, right? This is just like the ultimate, like, let me take care of my son and his friends. Can you imagine poor Peter? Peter's just got to be like so Mom. She's like, oh, shush. Now, do you boys want a juice box? Can I get you a snack? Like, I just picture that, Peter's mom hustling and bustling into the kitchen and telling Peter to go into the pantry and Jesus, you just sit here and you just take a load off. And now, Peter, go get this for me. Simon? I just picture that. That's just such a mom move. I just love it. It's just, moms are moms, man. They love you. They take care of you. Shout out to all the moms out there right now. So Jesus hangs out there for the night and he heals people. Particularly, here you go again, where you get some demons coming and they know exactly who he is. He specifically, because he is the Messiah, he rebukes them and he refuses to let them speak. He doesn't want... It's this weird thing. He makes the claim to pretty much be the Messiah right here, but he wants people to come to their own recognition of him as Messiah rather than having spirits kind of bestow that upon him, okay? So there's a whole lot more that could be said there, but early the next morning, Jesus went to an isolated place. All right, So this is fascinating too. Why? Because he goes from all this time with people. He's healing, he's preaching, he's teaching, he's doing all this people stuff. And then he just needs to recharge the batteries. Don't you love this? This is a great shout out to all of you who just feel exhausted or overwhelmed or stressed. You know, that's what's happening here. It's no small thing being a full-time Messiah, you know? Everybody wants a piece of you. And so he sneaks off early the next morning. It's 3 a.m. and he sneaks out the window. I mean, it's just awesome. I love it. The crowds look and search for him everywhere. And when they finally found him, they begged him not to leave. They're like, stay forever. Will you stay, please? Will you stay forever? And he's like, nah, man. I got things to do. I must preach the good news. This is what we just saw. This is that Evangelion. This is the good news to the oppressed, to the poor, bringing sight to the blind, etc., of the kingdom of God. Now, that's a loaded term, and it's one that is used regularly in the Gospel of Luke. Kingdom is a thematic reality for Luke that is very important. He's big on kingdom language. In other towns too, because that is why I was sent. Now here's a cool thing as well that sometimes we can read past, and that is to say, you know, we want to be like Jesus. Well, if you want to be like Jesus, you are someone who is sent. You are sent with the good news, okay? So in the same way that we as Christians, you know, you think about, you hear this all the time, right? That we have the good news. We're supposed to spread the good news. This is essentially the mantle that Jesus leaves us, is that we spread the good news of Jesus now. And Jesus spread the good news about himself, that he had arrived, that he was here to forgive, to heal, to redeem, to rescue. So Jesus paved the way in terms of establishing what it means to be sent. We are a sent people. This is why at Christ Church, we're a church for those not here yet. That's our way of saying, look, there are other people in other towns that have not yet heard the good news. And so we are not going to sit back and twiddle our thumbs and, you know, imagine if Jesus would have said yes to hanging out in Capernaum forever. What the heck? That would not be good. Wouldn't go very far, would it? So this is inspiration for us as Christians to get busy sharing the good news, being a church for those who aren't here yet, because there are other people who need the good news of the kingdom of God in other towns too, in other homes, in other communities, in other lives, in other families. They need that, and we got to be the ones to bring it to them. We got to preach them. How beautiful are the feet. And this is why we are sent. We're a sent people. So he starts doing his traveling, preaching in synagogues throughout Judea. Judea is going to be the larger... if Galilee... let me think the metaphor through. Susan, are you still listening, Susan Eggold? What town did you grow up in? Susan, if you have a moment, type in, what town did you grow up in? It's going to be helpful in an analogy I'm coming up with. So, the analogy would be like, Judea is to the Midwest. Galilee is Wisconsin. Capernaum is Milwaukee. And Nazareth is... Oh, how do I say that, Susan? Ogilvy? Ogilvy. Nazareth is Ogilvy, Minnesota. There you go. That's the analogy. Okay? That gives you an idea of like Judea is like the Midwest. It's a bigger area. Okay? And then Galilee is a smaller geographic area. Capernaum is that bustling, you know, metropolis kind of thing going on. And then Nazareth is the little unincorporated town Aglovy. I'm butchering that, Susan. I'm sorry. It's the little unincorporated town up north or whatever. So there you go. That gives you an idea. So he's traveling all over the place. And when it says throughout Judea, it's probably mostly in the north. Okay, that's his with his home base being Capernaum. That's mostly what's going to happen. And next chapter, part of the reason why we know it's probably in the north is because the next chapter, this is when we start to get his real disciples going. We start getting more and more disciples. He starts getting a little bit of a momentum going on, right? He knows Simon Peter before this, but the question as to what it means to follow and Ogilvy, Minnesota. Ogilvy. Thanks for the clarification there, Susan. Appreciate it. Katie Matson, I hope you are feeling better. I know you have not felt well. I am so very sorry that you are not feeling well, but you are most welcome for all of the info, and I am so glad that you are tuning in. Hopefully you're sitting there with your pup and relaxing a little bit, taking a load off. I really hope you start feeling better soon. So sorry you're not feeling better, but it's fun to hang out with you tonight. Thanks for joining us, Katie. So there you go. He launches from here on out. 8:30, time to be done, guys. We're going to pick up with chapter 5 and moving on from there. This is where he starts getting some momentum with disciples and really getting them on board with, moving with him and traveling with him and all this sort of stuff. Okay. They're kind of like, up until this point, Simon Peter's hanging out with Jesus in his spare time. They're not sitting around wasting time on social media at night, okay? That's us hanging out together right now doing Bible study, right? Ayo. But they weren't doing that. They were, when Simon Peter had free time, he'd try to find Jesus and hang out with him more. So in terms of timeline, Jesus was 12 at the temple when Mary and Joseph lost him. And then the story picks up when he was 30. Do we know anything about the 18 years in between? Absolutely, totally, and completely nothing. And if anybody tells you different, they are not inside biblical, canonical, Orthodox Christianity. Good question, Joe. The answer is no, we don't. We don't know nothing. Now, there are... Dan Gonring, you are most welcome, my good sir. You are most welcome. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, buddy. Henry is here, too. I'm so glad. Joe, to answer the question, though, the answer is no. We don't know. And it's a point of contention and danger. I'll be honest, because what happens is when there's a gap in that knowledge base, we want to fill it. We want to know what was it like when Jesus was, a 22-year-old or whatever. What was Jesus like when he was growing up and all those sort of things. And we don't. We just do not know. Anyone who says they know or talks about other works or other, canonical, non-canonical gospels, that is gospels that are outside of the Christian faith. That's one of the things that's very hard for people is they don't know this. A lot of people don't realize this, but naming something a gospel does not mean that it's actually part of the Bible. There are gospels outside of the Bible that try to claim to be divine and claim to be accepted in the canon, but they are not. They are rejected. As an example for you may have heard of the Gospel of Thomas. That is a completely different religion. That is something called Gnosticism. That is a lecture for another day, my good friends. I am very passionate about educating people related to Gnosticism because the Da Vinci Code came out and confused the heck out of everyone when all of a sudden they start learning about, there's all these gospels that weren't allowed in the Bible. Why not? Well, because it was a different religion. In that religion, the Jewish God is actually evil. Yep, that's right. We'll talk about that another day. But to answer Joe's original question, we don't know. And even, we don't know. What happens is people try to make up stuff to help fill in the gaps. But we don't know. All right, guys. Any other final questions? Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. Any other final comments on what story you wish you could step into as an observer? I'd be really curious. Most of all, I just want to say thanks for hanging out tonight. Thanks for doing what you're doing right now, being part of that online community. We are an online, on-site church, and by being part of tonight, you are part of that online community. Thanks for joining, and thanks for tuning in on Tuesday night for Tuesday night teaching. It is a blast, as always, hanging out with you guys. Sunday morning's coming. We keep tracking along. I am Jesus in his own words, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10:30. Make an invitation. We are almost to Easter, and this is one of the number one times that we can extend the invitation. People are open to it. People are hungry for it, particularly being able to say that we have a safe, healthy environment for people to re-enter and to navigate in a safe environment is critical, as people are trying, they're frustrated, they're tired, they miss people, etc., etc. And so we want to be a place both online and on site where people can find that connection and Easter celebration. So please, 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 please go out of your way to extend the invitations to people to come and be part of it coming up this Easter. And then, as always, if you want to hang out and join me on Thursday morning for Thursday morning meditation, would love to have you join me for Thursday morning meditation as well. It's always fun and enjoyable to do that. We do prayer, we do scripture, and then we do Holy Spirit shoutouts on Thursday in the morning. Sherry, you are most welcome. Thank you. As well as to Brian. I hope you and Brian enjoyed just kind of hanging out. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to all of you for tuning in and being part of it. Have a great rest of your night. Go lift some lives. Go elevate Christ. Go be a church for those who aren't here yet. We'll see you all on Thursday. If not on Thursday, then I'll see you on Sunday. Have a wonderful night, guys. God bless you all. Thanks for hanging out tonight.